Okay, so it'd be good to start with just a little bit of background on Planatome as a company, the sort of when, why formed, some of the key people involved, and what's what you've achieved to date, the roadmap.
Sure. Yeah, no, that'd be great. So I'm going to go back just a little bit before Planatome actually existed, to Entrepix, which is a company my business partner Steve and I started back in 25 years ago now. It's hard to believe, right? So we sold that company to a company called Amtech this past January. But in the meantime, one of the things we'd done as with that company is we truly specialized in chemical mechanical polishing or planarization. And we launched the world's first ever foundry, so CMP foundry, just dedicated to that. So we started doing polishing for everything from companies as big as Intel and Apple, all the way down to one-man consulting type firms. So we built up what we believe to be the world's largest portfolio of CMP processes on so many different materials and so many different applications that in 2016, our CFO, his name is David Husband, he posed the question to us. He said, here we are, this small company Entrepix, doing business with all these huge companies. How else can we harvest this technology? Where else can we use it, harvest some value out of it? So that started us thinking, where else, what other industries could benefit, will pay for technology and can benefit from something being perfectly atomically smooth or pretty close to it. And so we started looking at three different industries: medical, aerospace, defense, and automotive. So, and medical is the first one we found an application with, and we really started honing in on that. So, so as we were diving deeper into that, we had a very good relationship with a gentleman by the name of Cliff Spiro, who is the CTO of Cabot Microelectronics, the largest slurry and probably the second largest pad supplier in the world. He had recently retired from Cabot. And one of the things he developed while he was there was taking this CMP process and putting it on the scalpel itself. And they patented a certain aspect of it, but they just wanted to sell their more of the slurry and or pads. Didn't really think about or care about necessarily the clinical benefits. Is there a clinical benefit to this? So when Cliff retired, he was very passionate about it. So he bought the patent from Cabot, and then he was coming around looking for money to start a company doing this, right? At the same time, we were looking to say, hey, how else can we use it? So it was like a perfect marriage. We knew each other so well for many years, had great trust in each other. So we spoke to him the first time in February of 2017 about it. And June 1st of 2017, we had all the paperwork done. We dropped down a subsidiary company then called Entrepix Medical. Now we've since changed the name to Planatome because we sold Entrepix, right? We didn't want to have any confusion, and Amtech is still running it as Entrepix. So that's kind of the genesis behind where the technology came from and how the thought process went for that.
Okay, and in terms of so as I understand it, it was with the partner there, it was kind of coincidental, the fact that the scalpel was involved because as you say, he was wanting to sell more product. So what, if you like, led to the idea of looking at redesigning? Did you then sort of stand back and say, okay, we can actually redesign it and there will be benefits? It's not just about shifting more product. There's actually some meaningful benefits to doing it as well. What was that thought process?
Yeah, great question, and that's really where we stepped in and said, okay, and that was the beginning, saying, are there truly clinical benefits that the medical industry will pay for, will not only pay for, will of course benefit from patients, and that they would be something that they would adopt. And as we looked more and more into the scalpel hasn't changed since it was patented in 1915. It's manufactured pretty much the exact same way. They've done some things to drive down the cost, but if you look at it, it's diamond grit wheels that just grind stainless steel right up to a point. So you've got all these stainless steel serrations and jagged edges that stick out, and nothing's changed since 1915 except maybe a little bit of material changes here and there, but the form factor is the same. So we then embarked upon looking at what kind of benefits will surgeons get, and will patients get, and of course also then the big, large hospital administrations, right? We want to make sure all shareholders are getting something, and we found tremendous benefits in all three.
Okay, so in terms of the actual redesign work, I mean, was it a complicated process, or you knew exactly what you wanted to do and how to achieve it? Therefore, it was just a question of going through with that and then checking that what you'd thought was going to happen as a result, what was indeed
Yeah,
the case.
yeah. So, as is probably always the case with entrepreneurial things, what was very simple in my brain was far more complicated in reality than we thought, right? So we knew there were some complexities, right? If you look at a wafer versus polishing a scalpel, they're very different form factors, very different sizes, shapes, all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of work we had to do in taking the traditional CMP process and adapting it so that we could use it on a form factor like this. So, and one of the things that we found as we were going down that path is that the surgeons tactile feel, their digital feedback that they get in their hands that they're feeling as they're cutting, is remarkably astute. So making the changes that we made, where we just took those serrated edges and we just removed all the defects essentially, they could feel that difference in a big way. So, and not always in a beneficial way. There were no question benefits clinically to the patient, but doctors had to, you can think of it like a snowshoe, right? Doctors had to push a little harder because we are taking this pressure that they normally would push down with these little jagged edges, and we spread it across this whole perfectly smooth area. So they had to actually push a little harder, which is counterintuitive, right? It's not what you'd think, okay, well, we're sharpening it, but we're really not. We're just removing those edges. So, and then there's also the factor of, as they're making their cut, they feel more drag because they've got more surface area touching it. So we had to not only design how we apply CMP to the scalpel, but then make design changes actually in the scalpel and the shape of it itself, such that we got it to the point where surgeons really, really like the feel of this scalpel, plus all the clinical benefits that they're getting.
And in terms of the atomic level polishing, you said obviously you were not surprised, but there were challenges along the way moving it from your shall we say traditional applications to this. I mean, did you have to do a lot of redesigning of the machinery itself, or just what you had to do, I guess, to adapt from your traditional business area to this medical application?
Yeah, it was a huge redesign. It's a completely different tool. All the fundamentals are the same in terms of, the physics, the chemistries, all that kind of stuff. The materials that we use, we adapted the materials for the form factor we're using, but we had a very specific piece of equipment designed for us that we worked with a company that really specializes in automating polishing processes, such that we had we're able to polish. If you have the slightest variation as you're coming along this the blade edge, surgeons will feel that. It was remarkable for us how much they could actually feel. So we had to go and while we have a patent on it, we also I very much live the Andy Grove philosophy: only the paranoid survive. So it worked for Intel. Hopefully it'll work for us. But we keep the specifics of that very much a trade secret because of the design of that. But I can tell you it's a very complex 6-axis robot that polishes every specific edge of that to a very let's say very, very fine criteria, such that it feels proper while providing the clinical benefits.
So I'm just thinking, compared to a semiconductor application, was it more demanding to design for the reasons you've outlined, or just a different set of challenges?
For my experience, it was more demanding because of the things we had to change that we didn't know we were going to need to change, right? So we took our knowledge of CMP, and every time we would go apply that on other types of wafers and other types of materials, you had all the equipment and everything you needed to do that. You just needed to find the right combination of materials and chemistries to do that. This one was, there's an element of it that was the right materials and chemistries, but even if you have that, the manner in which you polish it and the shape which you decide to leave it in has an absolute impact on whether the surgeons will use it or not, even if there's a clinical benefit, which is a surprise to me that, I thought people would just change, but you've got surgeons that are really good at what they do and they've been doing it for a long time. They don't want to change the way they're cutting, how they do it and the feel of it. So we spent a lot of money and a lot of time working really closely with surgeons to get it to where they want it.
And this might be a silly question, but has anything you've learned in this application, are you able to transfer that knowledge back into the semiconductor space, or because it's just a different application, it was just a one-off and no sort of knowledge transfer possible?
It's actually a very good question. So I don't think necessarily we can take anything from this back into the semiconductor, but what we can do is take what we have with the scalpel and move it into many other surgical instruments. There are all sorts of different things, and we have a roadmap to do that. So the scalpel's the first of the products, and we chose that because there's upwards of 5 billion scalpels used every year, so which is remarkable. So we chose that, but our patent, both the one that we acquired when we started the company from Cliff, as well as the two that we filed since then, they are written and granted very broadly. So it's for the use of CMP on all surgical cutting instruments, such as a scalpel. So we've started with the scalpel, but after this, we're going to apply it to surgical scissors, to laparoscopic instruments, robotic end effectors to make them be able to use those end effectors more times before they have to dispose of it. So, and then we found some benefits that we didn't even think we would have in terms of the durability. It's not something we were looking for, but the durability, where some surgeries where surgeons would use 10 or 15 scalpel blades, they only needed to use one of ours, because those serrated, jagged edges are actually also a source of defects. They either gunk up with tissue or they bend over. Well, ours is so perfectly smooth, there's no place for tissue to gunk up and there's nothing to bend over. So in terms of the efficiency of the procedures and the fact that doctors don't have to change out the scalpels was a huge benefit.
So in terms of the adoption, I mean, you say obviously doctors, people are big surgeons, whatever, have been operating for 30, 40 years, whatever. So I suspect they might have been reluctant or suspicious when you came along with this nice new shiny object. Have you now sort of overcome that and the benefits that you've outlined for them and obviously patients, and then you said the wider the hospital administration, has the benefits sort of compelled people to take a serious look at this, or where are you with that journey?
Yeah. So with any new product, right? You've got your early adopters that are open to all sorts of technology. So that's where we've been in terms of designing it. We're right now in this first quarter coming up, we're going to start commercializing it. So we haven't really been selling the product at all, but we're just going to launch that. But we have some really, really impressive key opinion leader surgeons that have found tremendous benefits to it. So they're getting up. And what's really neat is when the surgeons will tell you, let us sell it for you, because when we speak to our peers, we tell them what we truly believe, right? We've seen, particularly if you go into the plastic surgery world, they see all sorts of different gimmicks and everything. So he said that, their spidey sense, if you will, is, really gets up about certain things where they go, this might be kind of snake oil. But with this, as soon as surgeons see the difference in the blades, number one, they're usually shocked at what their current blade looks like. Because all blades look this same way as the pictures that I'll send to you. They buy into the clinical benefits right away. I mean, it's very intuitive. And then as soon as they use it, they're like, oh, wow, right? And most surgeons don't think about, they haven't considered that they could get a clinical benefit from a scalpel. It's so inexpensive. They usually just think of it as a non-issue, right? They just, well, this is as good as it is. So
in terms of your sales moving forward, then, I mean, I think you explained you know sort of chemical mechanical planarization is your thing. So are you going to sort of with this bit, I don't know, fire up a separate company to focus on the medical, or will you still do it under the overall umbrella of the company? And I mean, how much potential does it have compared to your other, activities that you get up to? You know, how big could it be for you, I suppose?
Yes. So the semiconductor side of the business, which is that company's Entrepix Inc. That one we were acquired by Amtech Systems back in January. So that we're not in the semiconductor side of the
Right.
business
Sorry. Yeah.
anymore whatsoever. So we actually did in June of 2017, we dropped down what was then a subsidiary company, and then in January of 2020, we rolled it out so it was completely separate entity. We did a Series A capital raise, started one. COVID hit a couple months after that, which put some a couple monkey wrenches, as they say, into our plans. But it actually gave us the opportunity to realize a lot of the things that I've just talked about that we didn't realize, right? The feedback from the surgeons, and that we had to really redesign things so that they were happy with the feel of it on top of the clinical benefits. So.
And maybe just in finishing, in terms of cross-industry collaboration, I mean, in this case, you knew the technology and went out looking for, places where you could use it outside of your comfort zone or your traditional area, shall we say. But in terms of how it works, generally, it's fairly random. Do you think there's any sort of benefit in, I don't know how it would go, be established, but sort of more formal cross-industry collaboration, as opposed to people having a hunch about something somewhere in which people could, almost say, we've got this issue, and then flag it up to industries that might be able to help? Or does that already happen? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's there's no question in my mind that there is a ton of benefit that can come from cross-industry collaboration, right? So one of the biggest aspects you have to consider when you're looking at innovation is the risk factor, the dollars and the risk, right? So we took something we knew already very well and said, where else can we apply it? So that takes the risk factor from really high down to lower, because we know the technology. Now we just have to find if there's something else somewhere. That said, there are at least 2, if not 3 other of the semiconductor processes that I know, or at least I have very high confidence that we can utilize those to make additional improvements into the medical surgical field. And that's just one industry that we've looked at. We have there's consumer, commercial, industrial, all sorts of different applications where I'm sure that we can take, semiconductors is the most advanced manufacturing in the entire world. So if you think about that, what the knowledge that we have there can be spread across so many different things to make huge improvements in a much faster way than those industries trying to recreate or make small step function improvements and things, right? We can make an exponential improvement, which is what we see in the healing process, because we've smoothed off these, we've taken off these defects. We get much faster recovery. There's improved immunocompromised wound healing, like diabetics that have a very difficult time healing. They can now, the studies that we've done show that a diabetic patient with our Planatome blade will heal as well or better than a healthy patient with a conventional blade, which is remarkable. I mean, there's a lot of things they wouldn't do surgery-wise on diabetic patients, but it's such an improvement to the healing process, as well as reduced scarring, reduced pain, and improved nerve regeneration. So, and this is just kind of touching the surface.
Okay. I mean, I'm fascinated by this and intrigued, and hopefully we can touch base, sometime in the new year and find out how you've got on. But at least for now, Tim, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Phil.